We aren't going to do full-fledged temperature checks until we get to Tier 3, but Tier 2 will just be a random assessment. The other thing that is really awesome about each one of our staff members and each one of our students is that they do communicate when they don't feel well. And our staff members are watching their kids that they have, and they're monitoring the kids. And they already do this. They've done this from the get-go. If a student shows up and they have their head down on the table and that is not normal for that child, they're going to have a conversation with that child just to see if that child is well, what's happening, and then maybe do a little bit more screening with that child. So again, as we go through Tier 2, we will again look at those measures of making sure we practice good hygiene, making sure that we have those pieces in place as we continue on. So Tier 3. Tier 3 is where we're starting to see community spread, and we are starting to see more pieces that really are going to concern us. So this is where we actually might move to a hybrid approach. And I know that we have last time I checked, we had over 700 parent and community members that have completed that survey, which is awesome. And one of those questions was, what approach would you like? What approach would work for your family? And I'm going to say I don't think any approach would work unless they're in school for my family. But what approach could you make work? Because that's the thing, is we know that if we get here, we have to look at those options. So as we look at Tier 3, we will definitely start eating in the classroom. And as I said before, we will conduct temperature checks and screenings when students arrive. Just to make sure they don't have symptoms, we're asking the parents to conduct self-screening. We're asking kids to start figuring out how do they feel. We're asking our staff members to stay home. We're asking kids to stay home because we know sometimes we have staff members who it is much more difficult to stay home than to come to work sick. We can't have that. So we're asking staff members to, take care of their lesson plans, do their lesson plans, and stay home when they don't feel well. We're asking kids to do that too. So as we look at this, here are a couple of the different options that we look at. We can look at A-B days. So we could say A is a Monday and a Thursday, B would be a Tuesday and a Friday. On Monday and Thursday, we're going to have letters A through L, or students with last names or family names that start with A through L are going to come to school. On B days, it would be M through Z. Because our goal really at Tier 3 is to get our buildings down to 50%. 50% capacity so that we can then work with, again, making groups as small as we possibly can. Another option that we have is morning or afternoon. So again, we would still keep with the A through L or M through Z, and then we would have mornings would be A through L, M through Z, and all the time during each and every tier, we will have grab-and-go breakfast, and we will have lunch that will be pre-plated. So when we start August 12th, the kids will not go in and touch the fruit or touch the vegetables that they want to get. They will have everything served on their tray, and then they will have silverware put on their tray, they'll milk put on their tray, but they will not touch anything at this point in time until their tray is given to them. So that is one thing that we've worked with our nutrition services to try to limit the number of people touching what our kids are getting. Another option that we might look at is we know our preschool and elementary students are probably our hardest to find daycare for. I know that if I left my 9th grader at home, I would hope, and I would probably have to nag a little bit, but she would get her stuff done. But I would tell you my 10-year-old would probably get nothing done if I was at work and had to come to work. So another option we are looking at is keeping our preschool through elementary in school during this point in time. But what we might do is we might spread them out. So if we have our middle school and high school doing remote learning, what might happen is we might then move our 5th graders and 4th graders to the high school just to spread them out. And then we might take our 3rd graders and move them to the middle school, 2nd graders to the middle school, and then spread out our K1-2s. So that's another option that we are looking at, just to spread out our kids if we would get to Tier 3. So you can see there's a couple different options, but what we're trying to do is figure out feedback from parents, feedback from our community about what is the best option. Because I will tell you, when we get to tier 3, as I said before, those 3 options are not convenient for people that work. I mean, it's not convenient for most of us. So those are some of the things that we're looking at, is what is feedback that we're receiving, but also what can we do? What things can we do to help, again, mitigate that spread, to help stop it? So with all of these pieces that we are looking at, with tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and even tier 4 where we go to the remote learning. Tier 4 will be, we are closing schools at that point in time. Starting tier 1, starting on August 12th, we will be working on the digital components with your children. We will be ensuring that they understand how to use Seesaw if they are a PK through 2nd grader. So if they are at home, they can access those. They know how to access it. We're going to be working with your 3rd through 12th graders on Google Classroom to make sure they can access it, to make sure that they understand how to turn in assignments, where to turn them in, where to find the assignments, where to find the classroom pieces. Because the other thing that we know will happen is we have some families that may choose to keep their children at home. They may choose to keep their child at home. And so we want to make sure that if you are choosing to keep your child at home because maybe they have an immune system that cannot handle COVID, that cannot handle anything else out there, we want to make sure your child receives the same experience that those kids receive in the classroom. So all of our classrooms will be sent out. All of our classrooms will be Zoomed out, or Google Meet is what we're going to use as the 2 platforms. We will make sure that you have, that parents will have access to know. We'll get you a little webinar as to what it is. We'll get kids trained on it as well. But we want to make sure that even if you are at home, you still have access. So the other thing we will be doing is working with families to check out devices. But we also know that that is sometimes just because I have a device doesn't mean I have access to the internet or that it's good internet. Because like our speaker brought up earlier, we do know that, and I know that some of you may, from personal experience, you know that if you have 2, 3, 4, 5 kids at home and you are trying to get them all on devices at the same time, watching a Zoom, it is impossible. You cannot do that. And so those are the things that we are considering as we're building these plans, is we've got to make sure that we don't let access stop the educational experience from being equitable, because it has to be equal for every child. The other thing that we are asking is if students get sick through any of these tiers, that you keep them at home. Keep them at home. We will again have all that learning right there at their fingertips. So they can get online, they can access it, they can stay home. And the thing is that what we'll be doing with that piece too is we will be taking attendance. So even though your child is at home, maybe sick, maybe they are, so Morgan, my youngest, gets sick. And what do you know, she's feeling awful, she cannot move off the couch the first day. Okay, fine, I got you. But I know that she's supposed to be fever-free. CDC is recommending fever-free for 72 hours. That's 3 days. So Morgan could be home for 4 days, she could be home for 5 days, for a whole week. And 3 of those days she could be up and running around. Well, she will not be, because she will be sitting on that computer and going back and getting all of that material that she lost, but also being part of that experience. So we will make sure that your kids are part of that experience, and we will make sure that that positive attendance, that their attendance is counted positively, because they are part of that experience. And we don't want to have any child who has to stay home or needs to stay home because they are sick hurt by attendance. So those are the pieces that we are looking at with Tier 3, but we are looking at that with all of the tiers. So as we talked about Tier 4, that really is the closed campus, and that really is a closure for 2+ weeks. So that is a long-term closure, and that would end up putting us into remote learning. But like I said, our goal is to make sure we teach. Our goal is to make sure we have resources for parents to understand what we are using, because that's a huge piece to it as well. We want to make sure that you can help your child with these components, because I will tell you there are some things that, my child uses that I have no clue. You're gonna have to do it, Morgan, because I don't know, or you're gonna have to do it, Maddie, I don't know. So that's the thing, is I wanna make sure that we provide resources to parents too, because parents are just as important in this process as the child is. Okay, so as we move through the tenets, this is exactly what we're looking at as we move through the tiers, excuse me. So tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4, we are going through each and every one of these areas. So we are taking a look at screening. What does screening look like at tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and then tier 4 would be remote. We are taking a look at school operations. How does our school operate? What do the hallways look like? Do we have one-way hallways? Do we have directional staircases? Can we use drinking fountains? You know, one of the things I will tell you at each tier is water bottles will be expected from each child. Now, we will have talked about those refillable stations. We are okay with that because my hand does not come in contact with any device when I'm refilling my water bottle. So we are asking each child to have their own water bottle. Food service, what does that look like at tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and tier 4? You know, how will we again continue to provide lunches and provide meals to our students if we are remote learning? What things do we need to modify that maybe we used quarter 4, but we want to modify if we ever get to that point? Cleaning facility modifications, extracurricular activities, and external facility use. This is a hard one. And this is, we will be working with the NSAA to really look at the guidance for that. Academics, and then we have, you can see that there is just a list of a lot of different components that we are looking at as we go through the different tiers and as we go through the planning stages. So, how can parents help?
Yes, thank you for that overview. I think I went off policy. Okay. Thank you for that overview, Dr. Nielsen. Again, that is like a 1,000-foot view. Those tenets that she talked about, I don't know if I'm going to work or not here. Those tenets that she talked about, those specific tenets are the dynamics, the pieces of the puzzle that have to all be put together that we're working on as we speak. So, as parents, how can you help? These are just some suggestions. This isn't all-encompassing. But remember to self-monitor your wellness and your child's wellness. When your child comes home from school, check. Take their temperature. Ask them how they feel. Talk to them. All right? Be vigilant in helping. Keep your child at home when he or she is sick. Reinforce strong hygiene habits. Ensure students have strong study habits and reinforce these throughout the year. So if we do end up in Tier 4 where we are remote learning, you've reinforced those study habits and they know how to interact that way. Connect with teachers in classes when students are at home. Reassure students that schools are safe and work with your child's school, not in opposition. Folks, when we work together, we get a lot more accomplished than when we work apart. So focus on that. The next part of this is probably the part that is the most dividing part of this whole thing that I've ever seen in my 30 years of education. And that's to wear masks or not to wear masks. The Omaha World Herald, that clip right there comes directly from an Omaha World Herald article this week. If you saw it and read it, then you know what I'm talking about. But to require masks or not, it's all over the board at the government offices in Nebraska. So, you know, not all of our policymakers have the right opinion on this. It just depends on who you ask. We get back to that spectrum. You've got this side of the spectrum, and you've got this side of the spectrum. And so, what are we going to do here at Beatrice Public Schools? And before I answer that question, I want you to know that I was on the phone this morning with all area ESU 5 superintendents on a Zoom call, and we are all pretty much in agreement that this is how we are going to operate in southeast Nebraska. That doesn't mean that's how they're going to operate in Omaha. That doesn't mean that's how they're going to operate in Lincoln. That doesn't mean that's how they're going to operate in Chadron or North Platte. Because this is different in different spots of the state. That's the one thing that we have learned. So how we operate may be different. But at this point, according to the Public Health Solutions, and again we were on the phone with Kim Showalter this morning, who probably has the most difficult job in the world right now, and so our thoughts are with her, but we also thank them and Tasha with Beatrice Community Hospital for always keeping us up to date on what's going on. There are actually 47 cases of COVID in Gage County. 40 of those cases are associated to long-term care homes. So again, we take all that into consideration as we make our decisions. Depending on the tier level or the dial meter, which we haven't talked about the dial meter today, I'm not going to go into detail on that, but there will be a dial meter that you'll hear some about in the near future. We are not going to require masks as we start school because we know we're in a low spread risk factor right now, okay? But there could be a chance that as that risk factor increases and we move to a tier 2 or a tier 3, we may require mask wearing at that point. So, although masks are going to be optional in the building, we have not received a lot of guidance yet and have not had the chance to receive a lot of communication with our transportation company. So buses, transportation may be different. We will let you know on that, okay? We will let you know on where we are when it comes time for that. So right now, masks are not mandatory. They are highly recommended, but we are not going to require mask wearing. Some resources that we thought would help you understand some of this are at this spot. You can find these in a lot of areas. The CDC guidelines, Launch Nebraska website, the Public Health Solutions also has different guidelines that will help you understand all the dynamics that are involved with those things. So we wanted to provide some parent resources for you. And then with that, we had one last video to show that comes from a good friend of ours who is a principal in, where? North Carolina? He's a principal in North Carolina, and he tends to keep things on the lighter side and very positive. So we're going to share with
Writing's
you
not that easy.
what his thoughts were in regards to this.
Is grammatically correct.
So I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but there are some politicians that have basically said if schools are not open in the fall, all funding is cut. So they have asked me to share their rollout for how it is we want to open in the fall. Their plan is based on the 3 C's: consistency, consistency. We got to be persistent in these things in the United States. So this is what it is that they are proposing and how we are all going to open this fall. First is masks. Everybody has to wear a mask. All students and educators and everybody in the buildings has to wear a mask. You can wear a store-bought mask, you can wear a homemade mask, it doesn't make a difference, but everybody is going to wear a mask. Now the second option there is don't wear one, okay? But you got to stick with one of those 2 plans for consistency. They were going to offer a third where you wear them sometimes, like in the classroom, but not in hallways, but consistency is the key. So everybody is going to wear masks, okay? Except the schools that don't. Next is temperature, okay? We all know that if you've got a temperature, there's a chance you might got coronas. So everybody's temperature has to be checked before you walk in the building. There's no funding to pay for people to be at bus stops and at every single door of a school to take a temperature, okay? So their suggestion is just to make sure that we trust parents to not send their children to school with a temperature. That one is my favorite. Okay, next are instructional options. Okay, parents are going to have 2 options. You can send your child to school when you feel it's safe and they're just getting their instruction like normal in the classroom with their teacher. Second option is to continue to the online instruction that we ended the year with. Okay, so you can either send your child to school or continue online instruction. Now, there's no funding for who's going to teach the online instruction when all the teachers are teaching, but who knows. Now, there's also a third option. You can keep your child at home for online instruction and then send them into school when it's convenient for you, like when you got to go shopping in or when you're tired of your child. That third plan is called what some of you do anyways during the school year. Okay, so those are the options for instruction. Next is the date of opening schools. We got to be consistent. So for everybody in the United States, it's going to open the Tuesday after Labor Day, which is September 8th. That will give us all summer to get ready to close. So everybody's going to open on September 8th. The second option there is to open at a different time, okay? But you got to choose one of those because we got to be consistent. And then the last thing is lunch. Okay, we can't be gathering a lot of students in the cafeteria. So all students are going to be given their lunch as they walk into the school building. Everybody will get an insured drink and a storm drink. And this will get them through the day so the teacher can just eat lunch in their classrooms whenever they're ready to. Okay? So these are the rollout options that we have been given to make sure that we can start school in the fall. I'm sure they will change next week, and I'll bring you the new changes then.
And that is pretty much a good summation of the changes that we would experience through all this. It seems to change consistently. So with that, I would just like to remind everybody that we have limited time, but we do have some time for some questions. We did give everybody a postcard, or hopefully you got one when you came in, because we know that we're not going to be able to answer all the questions. And so your questions that are in more of a general overview, we would appreciate you asking at this point. If you have specific questions about your child, if you want to write those down, and please put your name, email address, and phone number on them, and we will be glad to get back to you if there's specific questions. If they're not, then we are going to create a frequently asked questions document that will also be on our website. So hopefully that will take care of that. But we will open it up to questions, and I would just remind you that some of us are going to agree, some of us aren't. If you specifically have comments after this, then you can always call our central office. We'd be glad to visit with you. Email, whatever you seem to need to do to express your concerns or opinions would be appreciated that way. This would be a time, I think, for questions about some of the overview of this.
I have a few.
Okay?
So the first one says, will you allow parents, volunteers, foster grandparents, or other visitors into buildings within the district?
The answer to that question is going to be, it's going to depend on which tier level we're in. In Tier 1, we will have people that will be allowed into the building. As we get this plan out further, we will go into the specifics about what people will be allowed in. But obviously, as the risk increases from Tier 1 to Tier 2 to Tier 3, those visitors will become restricted.
Okay, another one is questioning the BLAST program, so the after-school program. Will that occur? Will that happen?
That is a great question.
Yes, it is still running.
BLAST program, as of now, is, yes, up and running.
Yep. So we will move forward with that.
Okay, the next one we got was, if there's a confirmed case in the high school, for instance, does that shut down the other buildings, middle and elementaries and the preschool?
At that point, we would initiate contact tracing, and we would rely on the help of our public health officials to, once we have that contact tracing done, we would determine what direction we would go in terms of closing the rest of the building. So I know that's not a hard, firm answer as to whether it be yes or no, but a lot of it's going to depend on the dynamics around that particular situation.
Okay. Technology platforms. This question stems about some maybe inconsistent approaches. Can you speak to the consistency of what technology will be utilized if it's needed this school year?
So for technology platforms, we are looking at Seesaw for K2. That will be our main platform. They will also use their Journeys platform, which is their reading, and then My Math, which is their math. So they will use those three. But like I said, our biggest goal is to teach it to the kids so they know how to use it. And then to provide tutorials for parents too as we go through so parents have that information. For 3 through 12, we will be using Google Classroom as our main platform for the learning. And again, we will teach it because 3 through 5 will also have Journeys and My Math as well. So we will be teaching it to the kids though right away so that they know it, but also providing those webinars for parents too so that you can take a quick tutorial through it so that you can help as well. Do we have a follow-up question? No, another question? Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, perfect.
Is there not potential, since we have so many buildings and so many comfort levels, just to open different buildings with the different levels of contact that people are comfortable with? Like what you would do in Tier 1 in the Lincoln School, what you would do in Tier 2 in Stoddard. Because even though you say we're at Tier 1, I mean, you can look around here and see that people are at completely different levels of personal comfort with where they are. Wouldn't that make sense?
I would say that what we're trying to do is establish a level of comfort across the district. And I think your suggestion makes perfect sense. I think it's a question that we haven't yet answered in terms of whether or not that's something we would do. I think if we get to level 2 or 3 and have to reduce to 50% capacity, that's definitely a solution that we have come up to, is to spread the kids out further across the district. But definitely something we can consider.
You said that the CDC recommends fever-free for 72 hours. So how does that look for the 20 days that they have, that they're able to be able to be out of school without being tardy or not tardy, but
Absolutely. So that is one of the things that we talked about is if they are remote. So if they Zoom in to my class, I am teaching an English class. And all of a sudden, first hour, this child is there at my class. The nice thing is Google Meet will take attendance. So then I will go back over here into Infinite Campus and I will mark them as present but remote. So we will have a special code for present but remote. So that's the thing is if your child is home sick, they can remote in and then it will not count towards that 20 days. And that also goes for the child that may not feel, I can't send my child to school because they have a compromised immune system. So we will make sure that we continue to track their attendance, that if they're participating remotely and learning remotely, then that positive attendance will still be there. So that's how we're trying to overcome that.
thank you.
Yep.
Piggybacking off of here, this is more maybe a teacher question, but let's say our secretary sends a child home because they have a fever, and this has happened in the past. They come back to school the next day because parents say they're fever-free. Are we allowed to send them back home?
We will be working with families at that point in time, yes.
Okay.
How many cases do we need to have to move through each tier to say, right now we're at Tier 1, how many confirmed cases do we have to get to go to Tier 2, Tier 3, Tier 4?
Good question, and we don't have a specific number. I think a lot of it may also, because like right now we have the 47 confirmed cases. We know 40 of them are really related to long-term healthcare facilities. So part of it will depend on where those cases are and where they're at in the community. And we do anticipate that at some point, it's pretty inevitable that at some point we will have cases within the school. And then at that point, we have to rely on the contact tracing to tell us exactly what step we need to take next. Good question.
Back with the attendance thing, since we're hoping that most of us probably do have internet, but looking at children that don't have that option to log in when they've been sick, how are we going to handle that for those children? Because it's across the board, we just think that, internet's for everybody, they have it.
Absolutely. That is one of the things that our tech department is working on is figuring out hotspots. So we had a student who needed a hotspot this year. So we ordered a hotspot through AT&T, the district took care of that, and then we were able to get that along with the device so that they could connect. Because that's a huge problem. And again, it goes back to just because even if I have internet at home, if I have 3 kids trying to get it on at the same time, trying to access it, it's not going to work. So the thing is that we are working with our tech department pretty closely to try to make sure that we help families and try to be as accommodating as we possibly can. Because back to the attendance piece too, is it may be that Maybe first hour, I couldn't access it because I had 2 other siblings. But if I get on later that day and access it and respond back to what I need to do, that'll still be positive attendance. So we are going to be pretty flexible, but trying to help families as much as possible.
That's a great question, and just some basic statistics along the lines of that I thought of as you asked it, and Dr. Nielsen was explaining it, is that at the end of last year, when we went into remote learning, we had probably somewhere from 12 to 15 families that did not have access. And while we're here, thank you to Windstream for all their help in providing access to some of those, to all of those families. We did have one that still could not get on, but we did get the hotspot situation in place for them. So that worked out really well. We checked out about 150, I'm going to say 150 devices during that time period to students that needed them. And we're in the process right now of ordering more devices to reach our K through 3 learners that will work more, that will work better for them if we end up going into a remote learning phase.
And I think something we gotta think of on both ends of the aspect is that, yes, you guys need to communicate with us what we're supposed to do. But as parents, we also need to have positive communication with you guys so that we can, jumble this together and make it good for our kids. That's our number 1 priority, not who's right or who's wrong. We definitely gotta be positive for these kids because we're showing them that they're gonna be in their life.
Can I get an amen? Thank you. You're exactly right. Yes, because again, positive communication and positive direction and working together will get us far further than working in opposition to one another. So, excellent comment. Thank you. Other questions? If you have them, I don't see any hands going up, so if you have them, again, don't be afraid to email them. We will do our best to try and answer them. Got her. A couple other things that I'll say, but first we have another question.
If we do go into having to wear masks at school, what can we do at preschool level? I mean, because I have 2 3-year-olds at home,